Welcome, everyone. This is Glenda Dawson, and you're watching Glenda's Dragon's Den. We come to you every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. And I want to thank everyone who always joins us, whether in chat or joins me later, and sends me emails, giving me feedback on the guests and their stories. I am forever gratefully blessed that you take the time to do that. Now, tonight's guest is a very, very interesting person, and he's got a lot to tell us about his life experiences, good and bad. But, well, you're going to hear all about it because we're not going to Dyson's place. We're going to have him just give it to us complete. Hi, Zen. How are you?
Glenda, thanks for having me. I'm doing wonderful. It's a bit cold here in Phoenix. I think it hit 114 today.
Oh, oh. And I'm complaining because we were in the 95.
Oh, yeah, but it's a dry heat.
Right. Yeah, it's very different than the very humid over here. It's
No doubt.
yeah. Pennsylvania is great, but you get crazy weather.
Sure, sure. I spent some time up in the Poconos as a kid.
Uh
Beautiful,
no,
just
it,
beautiful.
it is beautiful. But originally I came from Jersey. So growing up in Jersey and all that, it just got too crowded for me. So I moved over this way.
Yeah, it is a little more population dense than out west. Although,
Mhm.
Phoenix, we got 8.5 million people in the valley now.
Wow. Okay. That's a lot. That's a lot.
It is.
So tell us about yourself.
Oh gosh, the interesting thing that I find um, throughout my life, there's been a lot of different things, but I got started early. I was orphaned at birth, and of course didn't know it. We got adopted. I was 6 weeks old. Was adopted on my adopted parents' anniversary, August 12th. So
Wow.
that was, it stuck in my mind. The easy day to remember. Right? I always remember their anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was what, just slightly after 4. My uh, sister was adopted. Um, Different family, right? So no relation. However, there was no precursive events, right? So I knew she was coming. They informed me, um, and it gave them the opportunity to explain to me that I was adopted.
Mm-hmm.
Now at 4.5, that you don't really know what to do. I think at that point, I didn't have any questions about the love, or
Mm-hmm.
because it was obvious that I was loved and nurtured and cared for, and I, I went to Sunday school, right, as well as everybody. This was in the Midwest. I was born in Indianapolis and raised in Alexandria, Indiana, and what it did leave me, and I had the natural questions of wondering why.
Mm-hmm.
Yet I didn't dwell on that. The one thing that stuck in my mind, or that actually, I don't know if it stuck in my mind, and it had the result and the question that I asked, and that was, if I have a father and mother in heaven, can I talk to them? 4.5 years old, asking that kind of question, right? And lo and behold, turns out it could. I was standing in the landing on the landing of the stairwell and looking out over the front porch one night, waiting for Dad to come home with ice cream. It was dark, porch light was on, and all of a sudden I hear this big booming male voice simply say, "Hey, you." And deepen that about 2 more octaves, and bump it up with some subwoofers, and that's how it felt, right? It just permeated my entire being.
Right.
And rather than interact with it, I was curious as to whether Mom heard it or not. She was sitting at the bottom of the stairs watching TV, and I know it wasn't the television. And so I said, Mom, do you hear that voice? Imagine a 4.5-year-old squeaky. And she goes, no, what voice? And I said, the voice. I said, hey, you. She goes, no, I didn't hear anything. Must have been a peeping Tom. And at
Okay.
that point, I realized, okay, I know what I heard. And yet, obviously, she didn't hear it. So something else was going on. And so over the next few months, Dad worked nights at the time. He was a tool and die maker for General Motors.
Mm-hmm.
He'd leave, he'd take a nap between 8 and 9:30 and then leave. So in between 8 and 9, Mom would be in the kitchen and I'd be in the living room with the curtains drawn, pushed open, and light on, reflection from the window so I couldn't see outside.
Mm-hmm.
I would stand there and just project this voice, hey, you. And I would hopefully, have it respond.
Right.
After a while, as you know, we have 70,000 thoughts a day, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
and a kid probably has more than that. And curiosity, we just don't shut up, right?
Right. Right.
One night I shut up just for a moment and I heard the voice respond to me in the same, hey, you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I began having a conversation with it. I don't remember what the original one was. However, it stayed with me ever since. And there's this, we hear this term, the inner voice, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's usually our own. And this one may have been my own, but it was far older.
Right.
So I went through school not really noticing, much difference. I was a social kid, loved to explore, climb trees, do all kinds of stuff. And then we moved into a new home that my dad had built when I was 7. And I had my first out of body experience. This same voice, I came home from playing with kids in the neighborhood and I laid on the bed middle of the afternoon. I was tired and I closed my eyes and I started to feel myself rise. And I'm like, whoa, I was a little frightened. And the
Mm-hmm.
voice said, just take a breath and relax and let go. It'll be okay. And so I did. And I popped out of my body. And now I'm on the ceiling, turning around, looking at my body on the bed. And next thing I know, I'm snapped back into my body.
Right.
Well, during the night, then that same, there was a sensation that accompanied that. It was like a light, tingly, high-pitched frequency kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would feel that occasionally at night. It's like, okay, here it comes. And then I would let go and just go floating around the house, soon the neighborhood, then the town. And
Right.
within a couple of years, probably a year and a half, maybe, I was laying in bed one night, thought I was asleep. Next
Mm-hmm.
thing I know, I wake up and I'm looking at my body in my bed from the corner of my bedroom. And I watch my body get out of bed, climb out my bedroom window, walk it, and then I move through the wall as I'm watching this.
Right.
Right? And so I'm walking across the neighbor's backyard over to a 10-acre pasture, climb the fence, walk out into the pasture. I get about 50, maybe 100 feet out into the pasture, and I'm watching my body start to rise up off the ground. And my observer looked up, and there was this orange cigar-shaped cloud that had to have been a mile long.
Mm.
And so I would watch myself rise up into the cloud. My observer would become one with my body as I went into the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd wake up in bed the next morning. And
Mm-hmm.
first time it happened, I couldn't wait to go back. Don't know what happened. Whatever it was exciting enough that it left me with that desire to want to go into that space again.
Right.
Well, that happened for a couple of years, probably twice a month. And then I'll fast forward for this little snippet. At 23, I was getting ready to move to Phoenix at the time. And I was walking through a metaphysical bookstore in Muncie, Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
A book falls off the shelf in front of me. Nobody else around. I'm like, okay, here's some weird, right? And it wasn't the first weird thing that happened to me. So I walk over and the book's laying cover up. It's Ruth Montgomery's Strangers Among Us. Now, this is one. It was published in 1978. So it was fairly fresh.
Right.
So I pick the book up. It's open. And I pick it up where it's open. And the first paragraph that I'm drawn to says the most common UFO contactee experience in the Midwest in the late 50s and early 60s was the orange cigar-shaped cloud.
Oof. Getting chills here. Getting chills.
So it was like, oh man, and all of a sudden, I don't know what it was in me, but a lot of things clicked. It was like a domino effect.
Right.
A whole bunch of stuff fell in line. Well, previous to that, now I went through back to the school, right? I was an excellent student, stellar athlete. I ran a 4.340 in high school. Um, I was graduated 10th in my class out of 300, probably could have been salutatorian. Although I didn't want to take calculus, it just didn't interest me at the time. And I went to college, a pre-med program. And in between first and second quarter, I had comeuppance, I guess. I was distraught. I didn't know that this is the way I wanted to go. I didn't, I was searching for something. And so I knelt in prayer and I prayed, Father, I want to know what truth is, and I'm willing to die for it if necessary. And I meant it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was on Saturday night. The following Tuesday, it was 11/11/1975.
Wow.
11/11, but the experience, right? Timings are just, dates and times are phenomenal in my life. So I come back from class and I'm laying across my dorm room bed listening to an album, and it was Journey's first album, by the way, a phenomenal soul-searching album, if anybody's familiar with it. Second song called In the Morning Day, there's a guitar riff that sounds like a rocket ship taking off right in between the vocals and the vamp. Well, right before that, this voice that I would have been familiar with asked me if I was willing to die for what I believed in. And after I clenched for a moment, right, you get asked, like, oh my God, what do I believe in? First thing was Christ consciousness that I thought. It felt a little empty for some reason. Being a Cancer, I feel, right? So that's
right.
Check in is the resonance of something.
Mm-hmm.
It feel quite full. So I moved on to cosmic consciousness, which is what I knew Jesus had.
Right.
And so it felt full. And so I said, yes. Well, and here's the guitar riff. Immediately, same moment, I get a tug from my solar plexus and I pop out of body. And I turn to look at my body laying across my bed, turn back to look where I'm going, and I'm immediately engulfed by white light. It has this amazing sensation. So then I start analyzing it, right? Not realizing it, I'm thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's effervescent,
Mm-hmm.
iridescent, and very high pitched.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realize I'm thinking. So the teenager, is like, oh, wow, I'm thinking. I can't be dead. Woohoo! Wow, is there more? Because it felt like everything, yet there was an obvious, I felt individuated in that collective.
Mm-hmm.
And yet there was this amazing sensation of totally being embraced by love.
Mm-hmm.
So when I asked the question if there was more, and it was a flippant question, right? Just going through my head,
Right.
I felt the movement. And then I'm in this indigo background with points of light surrounding me. And I know these points of light are points of consciousness, whether in body or not. I'm not sure because I know I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
I have a sense that they are somehow. And then the voice picks back up and says, these are those that you're to work with in this lifetime in order to facilitate a new world order. It will happen in your lifetime. Know this to be true. Your path will be full of trials and tribulations. Understatement. Have faith and trust that everything you need will be there at its appointed time. Trust and allow, right? And then I have this another rush of energy, and I'm back in my body taking a gulp of air. And I keep my eyes closed, and the song hasn't finished yet.
Mm-hmm.
However, as soon as I'm back in my body, I realize that we're all cosmic consciousness condensed into form, just unaware.
Mm-hmm.
Now, at 18 years old, what the heck do you do with that?
Mm-hmm.
I can't talk to anybody. I tried, talked to my parents, talked to friends. They all thought I was nuts. My parents saw me, took me to a psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist, after the third visit, he asked a lot of questions and just listened. And he says, you're not crazy. You've had a spiritual awakening. You've got all the signs. My advice to you, keep your mouth shut. Nobody's going to understand you. So it's hard for me to keep my mouth shut, right? Because it was so cool. I want to share. I want to find somebody
Right.
that, might understand. Well, in the process of that, though, I did a lot of research to try and find some other near-death experience that echoed or corroborated something that I experienced. And
Mm-hmm.
the only thing that I found at that time that really connected was in the Vedas. It was an English translation, and it described the same experience. And so, or at least, what the points of light, or it framed it differently. But today, the essence of the Vedanic philosophy is that we're all divine threads incarnate,
Mm-hmm.
connected to source, capable of God consciousness,
Exactly.
right? Same thing,
Same
right?
thing. Different wording.
Yeah, different verbiage. We all have different words to say the same thing, and
Exactly.
oftentimes we get caught up in the words and don't realize that the experience is similar, the
Mm-hmm.
same, right? So, got out of school, of course. Oh, the following year, I was still in school, and I bought a couple sets of drums and put them in my dorm room, and then had to move out because I spent my room and board money. So it was middle of winter. I had gone to school that day. It was, I don't know why, because it was 77 below zero wind chill factor. It was January 10th, 1977. And
Mm-hmm.
so that night, I tried to find a place to stay warm. I got booted out of the women's dorm because I couldn't stay there, and was knocking on frat houses and found one. Friend of mine answered the door. He was in my stats class, and it turned out to be a house full of jocks and with a long-haired looking hippie. Right. Once I was discovered in being there, I got beat up. Right? And so campus police took me to the hospital. My dad shows up, and instead of going home, he decided that I need to stay a while. And when he first said it, I think in blow to the head, I got hit pretty hard. Possible concussion, overnight observation. Yeah,
Right.
with
Right.
that, right?
Yeah.
So, and I got my bell rung playing football. Got knocked out, and so I thought, well, maybe this, something like that. My head wasn't throbbing like it did then, but still, I was concerned. However, a couple of orderlies come up, escort me into the elevator, and take me up to the seventh floor. Door opens up. Big black guy sitting on a chair stands up, wad of keys on his belt, pulls it off, and says, "Oh, got another one for me, huh?" And at that point, my heart just sank.
Yes.
And so a couple of days later, I finally had the chance to talk to the psychiatrist in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of listening to me, he went straight for the DSM-4 and labeled me a manic depressive paranoid schizophrenic and put me on 2,000 micrograms of Thorazine a day. And 400 or 500 milligram doses, right? Or microgram doses. Supposed to be a lump in the corner.
Mm-hmm.
I was up playing ping pong, beating the male nurses. They couldn't figure me out. So obviously I didn't have what, the situation that they thought. However, I kept trying to get him to listen to me, and he wouldn't. And there, about 3 weeks in, actually, um, I was sitting at the table reading the Bible one night, and there was a woman, a really wonderful, large black woman, sitting next to me reading a book about Wicca. And
Okay.
we started talking about stuff and comparing and contrasting and all that kind of stuff. And I was wide open, right? I was not stuck in any one religion.
Right.
And I felt it was more just the acknowledgement of what is, and the worship of that as opposed
Mm-hmm.
to a person or thing, right?
Right.
So she says, I feel like you need a blessing. Do you mind if I give you a blessing? And I'm like, sure. So she goes into her room, brings out a vial of oil, puts some on her fingertip, makes a cross on my forehead, does a prayer. And the
Mm-hmm.
following morning, instead of trying to get the shrink to listen to me,
Uh-huh.
I told him what he wanted to hear, which was that I'd been doing drugs and blah, 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 right? Which is not true.
Right. Right. Mm-hmm.
However, he
It
believed
got you out.
me. So I had to feed his belief in order to get him to understand that, hey, I'm not crazy. And, he told my parents, oh, miracle cure. He finally admitted, right?
Mhm.
And so then he started weaning me off the Thorazine, and 3 weeks later I left. Well, I shook like crazy on the inside, so bad that my body would tremble when people would start asking me questions,
Mm.
because I was afraid that I'd say the wrong thing and get put back in.
Mhm.
And so that happened for about a year. And then finally I started playing drums again and got in a band and got in the JCs and started doing some speaking, because I was really gregarious in high school. I did a trampoline act in front of 5,000 people for a halftime act, right?
Mhm.
So here's this kid that is just wanting to be heard and understood. And
Mhm.
throughout my life, I wasn't.
Right.
Uh, and it's hard for people to relate to something they have no direct experience of, and it
Mhm.
took me a long time to realize that, because
Mhm.
I knew I was telling my truth and my experience, and there was no reason for me to lie about stuff because it was so freaking bizarre, right? And yet, I ended up getting married, had a bunch of kids, and went to work, moved to after that book opening, right? I was working as a machinist, a meat cutter, and playing in a Christian rock band, and all three jobs fell through in the same number of days. Auto industry had crashed in the Midwest in '78, and it finally trickled
Oh,
down.
I remember that.
Right.
Yeah.
So it trickled down to our community,
Mhm.
uh, and by the time 1981, I was working, part-time jobs, and then those fell through, and it was like, oh my gosh. So I walked out on the front porch the following morning, and I literally threw my hands up to the sun, and I said, "Okay," out loud. It's almost screaming, like, "All right, I'm listening. Where do you want me to go?" And I'll be damned if I didn't hear Phoenix, plain as day.
Mhm.
So 3 weeks later, we packed up on the road, and that got here in April of '81. It hit 100 degrees that day and didn't go below it till October, I think. It was the longest 100-degree day period in Arizona's history, from what I recall. So began things there. Of course, my wife was not hip to anything about my inner world, um, and we eventually got divorced as a result of that, and some other things, a bunch of affairs that while I was at work, and it just got to be intolerable.
Mhm.
However, I had the opportunity to work in the aerospace industry, and I
Nice.
started as a machinist, and then ended up becoming an expediter, and then ended up in Materiel, which is a production control department.
Mhm.
Charges $7 million a month, 800 part numbers,
Wow.
and I loved it. I could go anywhere in the plant, get anything done. I was the youngest person in the department, and soared to the top of the production chart.
Mm.
And I didn't know it until two supervisors came to me. And of course, in my cubicle, I'm like, oh shit, what did I do? You got two supervisors,
Right.
right? So they said, oh no. They saw the look on my face. I said, no, we're not here to chastise you. We want to know how you're doing your job, because you're at the top of the production charts, 35 people, right? On time deliveries. So in that, um, I just offer my, I said, the only thing I can figure is just how I work with people, interpersonal skills. I treat people how I would like to be treated. And if I
Right.
can do
Perfect.
something to help them do their job
Mhm.
while they're doing something for me, then why not?
Mhm.
Right? That just seemed so considerate, right? Well, I saw people beating people up, not literally, but
Right.
verbally and emotionally, to try to get them to put their stuff at the top of the priority list.
Mhm.
That only works for a little bit.
Mhm.
So eventually um, I pushed for interpersonal skills classes and got pretty much shunned by everybody in the department when I raised the suggestion in the departmental meeting one year, and yet was asked if I knew a consultant and brought him in, and then subsequently ended up getting demoted and put back as an expediter. So I was a disruptor. This was in the mid 80s.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So it was not a pleasant time, and I got demoted the same week my divorce was final.
Oof.
Yeah, so it was slap in the face, and
And
then
really a slap in the face. Oof.
So and I was trying to be the best husband, father, employee possible. And I had a wonderful work ethic, obviously, with what the accomplishments. So that was the end of that.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad had told me, find a good company, work for, till you retire. And that's the way to do it. Well, it didn't work. And I said to him, Dad, I tried it your way. It didn't work. I'm going to follow my heart now.
Mm-hmm.
So the following year, I had a really kind of a reconnecting with self. And I had opportunities to experience some um, techniques, if you will, that William Swigart had developed in the 1950s. One of them is called the multi-level awareness technique, and the other one was called the multi-plane awareness technique.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the latter that takes the both of them are facilitated, so that they start out with being able to, for lack of a better, manifest your light body, right? So you're in body and you begin to visualize your light body around your physical body, and then you allow it to ascend and you project your consciousness into it, and then you travel.
Right.
And you're guided by the facilitator as to where to go and what to inquire about.
Mm-hmm.
They don't give you the exact experience, they just give you the direction, right?
Right.
And then the technique is such that you report back to them verbally what you're experiencing internally,
Mm-hmm.
which is pretty cool. Well, in this multi-plane awareness technique, you're taken through 9 planes of consciousness to integrate your body on each one of those planes.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're taken beyond that to show you that there's more,
Right.
and then brought back, and you're supposed to drop the bodies off on the planes that you got them on. Well, I got to the end of it, and I hear I'm out even beyond that, and I hear the facilitator said, okay, I want you to get ready to come back.
Mm-hmm.
Thinking, okay, I'm ready. And so I came back.
Right.
And I opened my eyes up. I turned to look at him. First words, uh-oh. I'm like, what? What did I do? And he said, well, you weren't supposed to come back. You were just supposed to get ready to come back. You're supposed to drop your bodies off where you got them.
Right.
And, I'm still flipping at that point. Oh, well, whatever. I'm back. Let's move on. Right. Not realizing. And so that night, I don't make the connection. That night, I wake up about 2:00 in the morning, and my room is just a buzz. I get startled awake.
Oh.
There's this noise, right? All kinds of stuff.
Right.
And I'm like, whoa, this is interesting. And then I eventually fall back asleep. Same thing happens for 2 weeks, and
Mm-hmm.
less and less. And then finally, I was working with a psychic, and we were putting an event together called Earth Concert 1989. And she'd been at the house, and I lived with some other people at the time. And she'd left, got home, called me up, said, hey, I left my day timer, which she had. And it was 11:30 at night. She says, I got to come get it because it's my life. Do you mind? I said, no, that's fine. And I thought, well, okay, it's late at night. Maybe I can talk her into spend the night and see what she gets.
Right.
Because she had no knowledge of my experience whatsoever. So sure enough, we go to bed. And at the time, she sits straight up in bed. She says, oh my God, how can you sleep in here? There's got to be at least a dozen different beings in this room.
Mm-hmm.
And then it dawned on me, oh shit, that's me.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So from 1989 on, I've been living with this multidimensional reality, and nonlinear, non-local at times, all kinds of crazy, right? And yet integrated, right? As I've grown, and I've got this radical curiosity. I want to know, right?
Mm-hmm.
How does this all work? And going back to the experiences as a teen, I want to know how to become aware of this cosmic consciousness that I am, and how it works, how I can share that with others so that they can become aware. And so my life, 50 years, right? I've been working on that. And in the process, my sharing experience, I did a TV show actually. Then, well, let me back up a little bit because this is important. In 1988,
Mm-hmm.
prior to having these experiences, I went to a full moon meditation with a friend of mine who was living in my guest house at the time. This was at the tail end of my divorce because I knew I was going to be in the guest house for too long. And we got back from this meditation. It was probably 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, the appointed time, right?
Right.
And our conversation fell quiet. And so I closed my eyes. I went inside and I asked the question, who am I?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because I still had no birth knowledge or anything. I knew I was this just blank slate at some, right? So as soon as I asked the question, I hear his chair move. And so I open my eyes up and I turn to look at him and lock on his eyes. First words out of his mouth, "You are Zendor." Same instant, second sight comes on, eyes open, and I see this starscape with a huge stone arch doorway and a thick wooden door slowly opening toward me. And I hear, "Door to what is?"
Wow.
And I'm like, oh man, come on, guys. I mean, I was just, again, flippant, right?
Right.
And so I tell George what I experienced, and then I put it on the shelf.
Mm-hmm.
And 2 years later, I got the opportunity to produce and host a television show. We called it One World. And I interviewed people from all walks of life about how they got where they were at, what prompted them to do what they were doing from both inner and outer perspectives, what fears they encountered, how they overcame them, and how they saw that fitting into the common human experience around them. These were questions that I had, right? So I was asking other people to get feedback to see if I was somewhere close in my own process.
Right.
And during the process that speaking of, I'd used my name, and then underneath it, I used Zendor as a subheading. And about 6 shows in, one of the guys on camera stepped out from behind it one night, called me Zen. And it cascaded from there. And at first it was like, no, I'm Bruce. I'm not Zen. And because I had issues with people changing their names when I was in college.
Right.
Well, I haven't changed it, although I've gone by Zen since 1990. Zendor is a bit too much still. Some friends do call me that. However, one of the first books that I wrote was called Zendor the Contrarian for that. And the book was it was an exploration. It was a catharsis for me to analyze and criticize and chastise and question and do all the things that we do normally internally, right? And because we have this, what I've come to know is a recursive function. That's generally a computer term, and it's a system that queries itself for problem solving.
Right.
So what do we do? Right? That inner voice, we're constantly questioning ourselves. But how deep do we go in the dissolving of self into the nothingness in order for the answers to emerge without projection, prescription, belief system, all those kinds of things.
Right.
And then what's interesting is that later I got a hold of a copy of Wilbert Smith's memoirs. Now, Wilbert was the head of Project Magnet in Canada, which is like America's Blue Book.
Right.
And so Wilbert had conversations. And one of the things that he called these people from elsewhere, right, that they had said to him was that humans don't understand nothingness. And that's where everything comes from. It even says, in all the scriptures that we have, that
in the beginning,
nothing comes
right.
Right. So how does that work? Right. And we're too still linear in our thinking, or we think that life is linear, and it's anything but. It's nonlinear, it's non-local. There's all kinds of dimensions. I have experience of it. So it's not just theory for me. I live it and have for a number of years. And, after the television show, I did that for 2.5 years, 120 shows, over 200 guests. And then I decided to go back to school. I got an MBA. After my MBA, I got a secondary teaching cert. I taught high school for 6 years, public school, special ed, self-contained special ed, charter schools. I had full charge of 2 different high school curriculums, built multiple intelligence learning centers in one
Mhm.
of them, and then at a residential treatment center. And I saw what was missing and ended up, of course, in my second master's degree, which was a Master of Arts in Organizational Management,
Okay.
wrote a business plan for a model school based on holistic education. Now, that holistic education is body, mind, spirit, planet, cosmos. Those are the 5 different relationships that we have. And as we get older, we recognize the importance of them.
Yes.
Why don't we teach that to our children? Right.
Right.
And we haven't got that to that place yet. I'm still hopeful. Um,
I'm very blessed that I came in knowing, didn't forget, and I taught my kids.
well, that's awesome. And I believe many do. Well, in the early part of my marriage, before a divorce, I used to talk to my 2 girls. I said,
Right.
they asked me questions. I'd say, "What does your belly say?"
Right.
And they understood that. They would tune in and listen. Well,
Yeah.
ultimately, many years later, I learned of this indigenous philosophy. I think it may have come from the Aborigines.
Hmm.
It's a 3-brain philosophy. The first brain is your gut. Second
Hmm.
brain is your heart.
Hmm.
Third brain is your head. And we're supposed to process in that order. Why? Because there's neurosensors in the gut that sense vibration. What's everything? Energy, vibration.
Vibrations.
Right? Then your heart is kind of the Taoist, is it desirable or undesirable? And,
Correct.
there's a pendulum swing in that, right?
Hmm.
And then you take that information and process it more clearly with curiosity in order to understand what all this means. So, our bodies are instruments. We don't know how to tune them, let alone play in concert. So how do we do that? And that's
Right.
been my life's work, is to be able to have some articulation of the process, because it's all sensory bound, right? We
Hmm.
can't think our way through a system built on vibration. We have to sense our way. And we're too living above the shoulders still,
Yes.
right? That we have no idea. And because of the faulty belief systems that we have, we shove what we think into our bodies and wonder why we become diseased in
Hmm.
any way, right? And
Hmm.
including the stress. I met my birth mother finally. I got remarried in 2016. I'm sorry, I met my twin flame at her Kundalini yoga teacher training
Ooh,
graduate. Right?
wow.
Really high vibe, right? And probably the only place in the world I could have met somebody that could vibe with me.
Right.
Turns out she's from St. Petersburg, Russia. She
Wow.
she was raised in the USSR as a piano pedagogue, so she was familiar with vibration and music and
Hmm.
classical trained, and just a brilliant and highly sensitive. She's Piscean,
Hmm.
so I'm Cancerian. We got this water thing going on.
Right.
Well, my first present from her after I got married in 2017 was a subscription to Ancestry, hoping that mom would show up. And sure enough, in 2019, January, my half sister shows up on Ancestry. And so I got the chance to meet my birth mother at 61.
Wow.
And I was the last thing on her bucket list.
Wow.
So we went back. I got to meet her, spent a week with her. It's a wonderful experience. She had 4 different types of cancer that were in remission.
Oh.
She really wanted to see me. And after that visit, her cancer came back.
Mm.
So I know all of this angst, and family didn't even know about me.
Oh.
Um, so holding all of this in, you can imagine what that's going to do internally. It's going to lodge
Yep.
some multiple places, right?
Hmm.
So another thing that I found out, because I always wondered, where did I get this weird shit from? Right. And it's usually
Right.
matrilineally passed along. Well,
Mm.
mom was smart, but she wasn't that smart. And she wasn't really interested in anything to that nature. However, she told me my dad's name, and it was Leroy Carlisle. And immediately I thought, you know, I met a guy named Lee Carlisle at a UFO conference here in Phoenix in 1989.
Mm.
Wonder, because he was from Anderson, Indiana, which was 12 miles away from where I
Close
grew up,
enough. Close
and
enough.
that's where my mother lived.
Uh-huh.
So I'm like, okay, that's the first sign. And then I had a friend of mine had skip tracing software. He tracked him from Anderson to Phoenix and up to Prescott. I'm like, oh my God, number two, right?
Mm-hmm.
Still not sure.
Right.
So I get on Facebook and I'm looking around and I find his um, Facebook page and I find out he passed in 2017.
Mm.
So I didn't connect with him, but I did find a guy that, because he invited me, when we met, we got along famously. Not
Right.
really. I mean, a fleeting thought, well, maybe that's dad. Didn't go any further than that. I just liked the guy. And
Right.
he invited me up to his cabin in Prescott. Well, next to his cabin was a house that he owned too, and he'd rented out. Well, the guy that was renting the house is the one that I found on Facebook. And he said, oh, yeah, I remember you.
Oh God. That's so cool.
So, and the last thing that he said to me is, hey, I want to go to India and find a guru, which he did. And the only photo that I have of him is with his guru picture. Um, and so there's this, magical mystery tour, right? Of all these things that have been put in my place for me to connect with and realize that this is true. These things do happen and there is purpose. I because of my experience, I know that each one of us have a particular frequency, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that frequency has a perfected form, fit, and function in this world.
Mm-hmm.
It's finding that we are so reticent of because we're codependent. We want to do what everybody else thinks we should do. And we're unsure of what we need to do.
Right.
And we generally don't have the balls to try, right?
Very true.
We're afraid of failure.
Very true.
And, there is no failure. There's just stepping stones. We have an experience, we learn, we grow, and we expand with that.
Exactly.
And then we carry that forward. Now, the thing that we generally do is we drag the past with us.
Mm-hmm.
And we judge the present or project the present based on what our past experiences were, rather than go back into that recursive function, dissolve, go back into that nothingness with curiosity
Exactly.
as to, okay, what's going on here? And then learning to be still enough to just be patient and listen and let it bubble up, because
Mm-hmm.
it does. I'm living proof of it. So these kinds of things, take place. And then along with this, right, I still have in the back of my mind, even though I worked in the aerospace industry, I taught high school for a number of years. I did transformational coaching for 20 years. And simultaneously, I also facilitated building road and bridge construction partnering workshops.
Okay.
Right. So you want to get concrete, there you go. Right. So I'm in the middle of the room with anywhere from 20 to 80 men and women who are focused on a project, usually multi-million. My largest was $500 million. Right. So I'm responsible for getting them all on the same page.
Right.
And I love the phrase, there's no ego without we go.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so I use all these metaphysical concepts, but I put them into practical terms and sometimes humorous terms for people to grok it or to understand it, right? And it worked, right? I had stellar reviews. I got 90% of the work outside of Maricopa County in Arizona for almost a decade, and then that disappeared when the state put out a new contract, and they were looking for a service that would cover all the aspects of a construction project.
Mm.
not just partnering.
Right.
So we didn't do that. And then my partner retired. I opened up another company, and then I did some work around the country, um, different types of things, and really enjoyed it. I mean,
Mhm.
for most people, standing in the middle of chaos like that and trying to find order is excruciating, and it just seemed to be natural to me. And during that period, I also managed the largest area, 350 vendors and 20 food vendors for the Tempe Festival of the Arts, which
Okay.
it's the third or fourth largest arts festival in the country. And also the block party. At that time, it was the Tostitos Fiesta Bowl block party. So
Okay.
one night, 250,000 people, 5 stages. I was one of 5 guys that put that together.
Oof.
And the Tempe Arts Festival, same 5 guys, 5 areas, 250,000 people over 3 days instead. And I love those kinds of things because I'm not spooked. I had a good training in the aerospace industry of being able to work with a bunch of people and get stuff done.
Mhm.
And it just seems it's a natural ability that I have. Well, now how have I applied that to my mission? And most recently, um, 2021, towards the end of COVID, my wife says, you really need to start talking to people again. You're brilliant. You got stuff to say. People love you. I give you permission. So I re-energized One World, which was the name of the show that I did back in the 90s, to One World in a New World.
Mhm.
With that, I had the same basic format, only I've got 30 years of experience now to ask better questions with. And I looked at, okay, now I'm going to go after the really weird, bizarre, insane kind of stuff that people don't want to talk about. And that's their inner experience. Right? We're bereft of talking. We live half inside and half outside.
Right.
Right.
Very
So
true.
we don't talk about what's going on inside because when we start doing that, it's so weird and nonsensical sometimes that everybody just goes, oh, I don't, and so dealing with that is like, okay, what can I do to help facilitate being able to talk about this stuff and help other people not feel so crazy? And so this is what I've done with One World in a New World. I've had over 200 podcasts now, 1.7 million views. And everyone, my recommendations on LinkedIn, I've got almost 200, 190. Um, and if I show up in person, anything like those recommendations say, man, I'm gold, uh,
Mm.
which is really great for being able to do integral coaching or transformational coaching
Right.
to help bridge worlds with others. And with my master's degrees, with the understanding I have of a variety of industries.
Mhm.
I was also in the music industry and theater industry for a while, traveled the country with a couple of children's theater shows. I mean, I just had all kinds of opportunities to say yes to. And unfortunately, because of that, I didn't stay in any one place very long, with the exception of coaching and partnering.
Right.
Right. But that doesn't have a retirement. Right. So in that, about halfway into the production of One World in a New World,
Mhm.
um, let me back up a little bit. In 2010, I got tapped on the shoulder to see if Planetary Citizens was available as a domain.
Mm.
I had heard about Donald Key's work in the 1970s, who was the founder of the original Planetary Citizens. He and Norman Cousins and the like of them. He was in DC. He was also the executive, or I think he might have been the executive director for Lucius Trust for a little bit too. But there were a lot of Alice Bailey stuff was going on at that time. There was this kind of clique of um, quasi metaphysical, political activist kind of folks that gathered together and were trying to say, hey, boundaries are illusory. We need to work together as a planetary civilization, not as nationalists, because that continues the war.
Right.
Right. And so the organization, it wasn't time yet. Um, it eventually fell apart. Well, the domain was available. Right? I didn't think it would be. And I was like, holy shit. It was click, right? I got it. And so for several years, I had showcasing the different organizations and people who were actively being world servers.
Okay.
In 2023, I get another tap on the shoulder to turn Planetary Citizens into a nonprofit. So we filed nonprofit papers in August of 23. In December, we got the okay. We got the letter from the IRS. And
Good.
we're now a 509A2, which most people are familiar with a 501c3 as a
Right.
standard nonprofit public charity. Well, a 509A2 is like a 501c3 on steroids. It allows you to do additional things for tax deductible stuff, right? Goods and services as well. So then 2024, I spent completely revamping the planetarycitizens.net website to show the spiral dynamics example and also the co-creation wheel that came out of it. Barbara Marks Hubbard was instrumental in helping develop that. I met Barbara as well. I had lunch with her at a contact in the desert. I think
That must have been an interesting experience.
it really was. I've had opportunities. I even met one of the other events, the Prophets Conference. I was hired during the time I was doing the arts festivals. The Prophets Conference came to town, and I got hired as a producer for it. They'd rented a property, had nothing. So I was responsible for all the logistics for 120 vendors, 5,000 attendees, security team, county cops for traffic, porta-johns, generators, tents, all that kind of stuff. Well, I got the opportunity to meet Jose Arguez and his wife, Lloydine, wonderful, hilarious couple. And so we spent several days together and during the prep time. And then I met Edgar Mitchell, who was the sixth man on the moon.
Mm-hmm.
And he and I, he walked out into the green room, which is outdoor. And I saw him pull a pouch of drum tobacco out of his back pocket. And I had one too. So I'm like, okay, here's the opportunity. So I walk up into the green room as I'm pulling the pouch out.
Right.
And he sees it and smiles. And I said, do you mind if we share smoke together? And he just melted. And he said, oh, yeah, this is great. I hardly know anybody that rolls, let alone smokes drum too. And so that started up for friendship. And over the weekend, we had probably half a dozen conversations, anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes, depending, because I was busy.
Mm-hmm.
And about 3 or 4 in, he says, I want to, and we had shared experiences too. And I told him quite a bit, a number of my experiences, a lot of which I haven't even mentioned yet. And after it built trust in him. Right. And he says to me, I want to tell you something, but you got to promise not to tell anybody till after I'm dead.
Ooh.
Now, this is 1997. And I was like, wow, what an honor. Wow. And I am a man of my word, if nothing else, sometimes to my detriment. He says, when we detached from the command module, because he was the pilot of the lunar excursion module, and he said all the way down to the surface, there was a metallic silver cylinder spiraling around us. So I couldn't tell the size because I couldn't get perspective and just had that little triangular window to look out of. Couldn't tell if it was one or several. Couldn't tell if it was piloted on board or from the surface. What he could tell is it was nothing from Earth.
Ooh, chills.
And so you can understand why I had to keep my mouth shut, because if that kind of information got out that he had said anything, his retirement would surely be in jeopardy, and possibly his life.
Yes.
I don't know if
and his family.
Right.
Because they may have, he may have told them.
I don't know, because I had one guy really get pissed off because he got to know Edgar really well and got him to back his organization, or at least verbally support it. Mm-hmm. And Edgar didn't say anything about him. So he called me a liar because Edgar didn't tell him. Well, it has to do with your level of trust, right? That gut
Right.
feeling of whether you can trust somebody or not.
Again, that good
Glenda
feeling.
died in 2016. And so in 2017, I talked about it. Now, meanwhile, I'd also heard that Buzz and Neil had seen similar objects standing upright on a platform beyond the dark side of the moon.
Mm-hmm.
So these kinds of things are out there now, right? How many videos have you seen of ships flying across the moon's surface? We got
Exactly.
the telescopic power now to do
Mm-hmm.
that.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't back then.
No. Now, as
So,
much as I don't want to interrupt you, we're coming towards the end. So we're going to have to do part two, definitely.
all right.
Okay. So anybody who wants to follow you can definitely pick you up on your main website. And from there, I'm sure they could follow you everywhere else.
Absolutely.
And
Well,
guys,
before
we're
we
going
close,
to
I would like to say one thing. If you visit Planetary
sure.
Citizens,
Yes.
you can get a free download of my latest book, which is my 43rd, and it's
Mm-hmm.
called Planetary Citizens: Awakening the Heart of Humanity. And it describes the theme of which I use on the website and why. And that, yeah, we're all planetary citizens. It's about time we recognized it.
Perfect. Perfect. And guys, I'm sorry to do this to you, but guess what? You're going to have to come back and hear the rest of this. So
That's a great hook for the next time,
it
right?
is. It is. Thank you so very much for
Welcome.
this.
Stay
And
tuned for more.
yes, there is much more. Hold on for a second. Thank you, everyone. And as always,
Thank you.
love you.
Love
Bye.
you too.